Mark Skaar on the Skaar Kaard on 103.7 The Fox. Proud to bring in T-Bear. How are you, sir?
Better for having spoken to you, I think.
Aw, thank you very much. It's nice to have you here, and you are back after a long hiatus with a new album called Fresh Bear Tracks. Congratulations.
Oh, thanks so much, Mark. I'm so honored to be on your show. Appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I'm impressed because you've got a lot of A-list folks that are friends of yours that helped you out on this. Let's start with Give It Up with Stephen Stills and Walter Trout. What a lineup that is.
Well, I got, all the planets aligned, and it was a strange kind of way that they aligned. I used to play in Stephen's band back in the day in one of the versions of Manassas that he had. And in playing with him, I was on tour for a little while, and then he and I were really good buddies, and the tour ended in Louisiana, so we went to New Orleans together. We hung out in New Orleans for a long weekend, and we got into the vibe of the whole city and the music and things, and there was a piano over there in the hotel, so I sat down, started noodling at something, and he went, "Oh, I like that." I said, "All right, let's write one." So we ended up, when we went back to L.A., putting a demo together of this thing we called Give It Up. And long story short, forgot about it. 30 years later or whatever, 40, 50, 60, 100 years later, it's a cassette sitting in a shoebox in my storage locker. And I was going through the locker and opened up this shoebox, and I see this cassette, and a lot of people don't even know what cassettes are.
Right.
But I happen to have a cassette player. Anyway, it says Stills, Give It Up. So I put it in the cassette, I play it, and I go, "Oh, that's pretty cool." So I went in the studio, and I was making the record, and I decided, I'm going to cut this thing. So I call up Stephen. I say, "Hey, man, you got to play on this thing." He says, "I do?" I said, "Yeah, you got to play on this thing." He says, "Okay." So went over to his studio. The rest is history. And then Walter Trout was doing overdubs on my record, and I said, "Hey, what do you think of this? It's got Stephen Stills on it." And he said, "Oh my God, it's so cool. Stephen's such a great guitar player. I love it." I said, "Okay, so you play on it with him." And he says, "Oh man, that would be an honor." And I went, "Let's do it." So that's how Stephen and Walter came about.
Talking with Richard T. Bear about the new album Fresh Bear Tracks. I'm curious about the song Cab Calloway. An influence?
Oh, yeah, influence. Donald Fagen, the Nightfly, was the influence on that.
Okay.
Big Steely Dan fan, the late Walter and Donald. And I'm from, New York City. And I knew those cats and a lot of the guys that played with them. And so listening to a lot of Donald's records, especially the Nightfly, kind of embellished me to go and do Cab Calloway. The backstory of Cab Calloway is a little interesting. If you got a moment, I'll tell you that.
Sure.
So I'm traveling around L.A. one day, and I saw a really old black man sitting at the bus stop in kind of overalls and stuff. Looked like he just finished work and he was heading home. And I looked at him and I saw him not in his overalls, his work overalls, but I saw him in like a white Cab Calloway zoot suit in my mind. And so what I did was when I went home later that day, I kind of wrote down a note about this guy, and it kind of morphed into what was he like when he was a kid. So here's the story. It's the Cotton Club in Harlem, and it's in the 50s, and Cab Calloway's playing with his big band, and there's a little youngster, 8, 9, 10 years old, and they nicknamed him C.C. Jones because he dresses like Cab Calloway. And he kind of brings Cab his coffee, and he hands the towels out to the bandstand after they come off the stand. He lights Cab's cigarette. And his name is C.C. Jones, Cab Calloway Jones. This is the kid that I saw in my mind. And it's funny because there's a video on YouTube that has Cab with a kid, and Cab's explaining the book of Hep to this kid. And it turns out it looks like my little C.C. Jones. So I put the story together. He's now 80-something years old. He goes down and dances at a club called the Hi-Hat. He dresses like Cab Calloway. He believes in his mind he's Cab Calloway because that self-soothes him. And when he goes to bed at night, he closes his eyes and drifts away, and he's Cab Calloway. So that's the story of Cab Calloway.
Talking with Richard T. Bear, I wanted to talk about the Zombies cover of She's Not There.
Zombies, big fan. Time of the season, She's Not There. and I would hear She's Not There quite a lot. And, and when I was starting out, of course, in our garage bands and things, we used to play, all those kind of records and try to emulate those bands. And now that I have kind of a feel for that kind of music, because I love the 60s a lot and the 70s, music that we got, and especially the Zombies, I decided to take it and try to bring it into kind of a jazz style, kind of a bluesy jazz style. So that was the take on that. When I went in the studio to make Fresh Bear tracks, we cut 23 tracks, and 21 of them were our original songs. 2 are covers. The Zombies, She's Not There, and Procol Harum's A Salty Dog. And so when I cover something, I try to do it a little bit differently. And so we do that live, and we actually, at the end of the song when we play live, we just kind of ride out with it. It's almost like an Allman Brothers kind of jam. So we play it that way. So we couldn't do a lengthy thing on the record, but it shows a little bit of ingenuity in the way it's arranged.
And you recorded the record, Richard, at Robbie Krieger's studio.
Yeah, Robbie's a good friend, and I was doing some sessions over there one day, and both Michael Dumas, who is Robbie's partner at Horse Latitude Studio, Michael said, "Hey, Robbie just told me anytime," because it's a private studio, he says, "anytime you want to come over here and do anything over here, the studio's yours." And so I said, "Hey, I'm thinking about maybe doing a record." He says, "Well, do it here." So I was in recording, and Robbie would drop by and he'd listen, and he'd go, "Got any room for a guitar on this one?" And I said, "We'll find one for you, Robbie, for sure."
Nice problem to have.
Yeah, so we did this song called Wonderland, which was a poem that I wrote called Malice in Wonderland, take off on Alice in Wonderland, all about the weird that happened in Laurel Canyon. So it was a perfect thing for Robbie, because Jim Morrison and Pamela and Robbie, they all were up in Laurel Canyon in those days. And so I said, "Robbie, here's a perfect one for you to play guitar on." So yeah, he played guitar on it.
Tell me a little bit about the involvement of Edgar Winter and Benmont Tench.
Okay. Edgar and I are really good buddies, and I'm a big Winter Brothers fan. I mean, I used to open for Johnny, his brother, live back in the day, and I got to meet Edgar a few times, and then Edgar and I are like Monday night dinner buddies. Every few Monday nights we get together and have dinner, and so he was talking about, and by coincidence, we were both signed to the same record company, so we're label mates, and this new label called Quarto Valley Records, so I said, "Hey, I've got this song, and it's kind of gospel, and it's all about trying to get people together and love one another again." So he said, "Hey, any room for a guy like me?" And I said, "Absolutely." I played him the track, and he go, "Hey, what would be really cool on this?" I said, "What?" He says, "Hey, let me get my alto, saxophone, and rock and roll." Just like that. That's Edgar. And I said, "You got it, man." So we went over to the studio called Force Fox 5, J.J. Blair's place, and we put down the alto on that, and the rest is kind of history. It's a really good track, and Edgar's a brilliant musician. And by the way, he just finished a tribute to his brother Johnny, which has all the great guitar players playing on it, doing Johnny Winter songs. So maybe look for that. That's going to be out on Quarto Valley Records as well soon.
Excellent. And then Benmont.
Well, there is no more brilliant musicologist than Benmont Tench. I mean, he is the professor of musicology, and you can sit down and ask him a question about a song, and he will bring you back to the roots. This song came about because this guy was listening to this guy, and that guy listened to, he just goes through the lineage and the DNA of the song. And Benmont was obviously in the Heartbreakers, and I had a friend, Steve Ferroni, who's the drummer of the Heartbreakers.
Yep.
So I know Steve from when he came over with the Average White Band, and we've been friends ever since. And Steve was saying, "Hey, the album, I'm hearing all these things about the album," and he said, "Who are you going to get to play some Hammond on this thing?" And I said, "Well, I'm thinking about getting two of the best Hammond players in the business, and one of them is Mike Finnegan, and the other one is Benmont. And I said, put a good word into Benmont for me. And so my producer, Tony Bronigal, and I think Steve put in the word, and then Benmont showed up at the studio. And he and I, we didn't really know each other, but we became fast friends, and we've been real close ever since. And, to look over when you're playing you're recording a track, and you've got all these great players playing with you, and you're next to Benmont, and you hear what he's doing to, accompany you on piano, or because I played all the keyboards, and I let the organ parts go to Mike Finnegan and Benmont Tench. And Benmont, in his wisdom, he would add little embellishments and things when we listened to the track. And I got to tell you, he was such an important part of the Heartbreakers and Mudcrutch, for that matter. And you listen to the things that he comes up with, and they're brilliant. I mean, we were talking about Latin music one day, and he says, yeah, I've been taking my wife to like Arthur Murray dance studios, and we've been learning all these dances. And I said, yeah. I said, what kind of dances? He says, just Latin things, but the really hard dances are the tangos. And I said, well, you know what? I just was watching a show about Robert Duvall. He's married to a tango lady in Buenos Aires who has a tango school, and I want to write a tango. So we ended up recording a tango. It'll probably be on the next album. And that was a direct result of Benmont saying, talk about dance. How did that come about? But he's like all over the board. He's a great musician and a great musicologist.
Richard, if people want to find the record, I call them records because I'm old, or if they want to just find you and follow what you're up to, how can they go about doing that?
Well, I have a Facebook page, T Bear, just the initial T and Bear. Instagram as well, and I'm on Quarto Valley Records. You can get the record there. Or Amazon, iTunes, Spotify.
Richard, thank you. Nice to meet you.
My pleasure.
That's Richard T. Bear. The album is Fresh Bear Tracks. This is the Skaar Kaard on 103.7 The Fox.